And so you had the thought, you put it out there, and you did it. And that's beautiful. And what he did it for is an amazing reason, right? And so I want to go ahead and read his bio for you all. Sam S.T. Prewitt is an award-winning media executive and the director of National Digital Partnerships for Urban One, where he leads digital strategy and revenue growth across the network's national and local brands. A 20-plus year industry veteran, Sam balances high-level corporate leadership with his on-air persona, King Cool, on Cleveland's 93.1 WCAK. I knew how to say that because I listened to you. Beyond media, Sam is a national voice for heart health. After surviving a massive heart attack at age 29, he launched the #HeartStrong movement to help others protect your heart and everything in it. He serves on the National Communications and Marketing Coordinating Committee for the American Heart Association and the board of Bike Cleveland. His memoir, Plus More Life, A Heartstrong Story, is available wherever books are sold, including here at ThirdSpace Action Lab. If you have not got your copy, please do. All right, so I want us to go ahead and get started because I'm really excited for him to share his heart and talk a little bit about this book and why it's so important. And just to introduce myself really quickly, my name is Daneé Pinckney. I am a teacher out in Twinsburg, Ohio, and I think the reason Sam asked me to come out here and moderate is because I was the 2025 Ohio Teacher of the Year. But as I read this book, all I could think about the whole time was how this perfectly fits into what I teach. And so one of my classes is a class on Black literature. And in this class, I constantly talk to my kids about the history that's connected to the literature. And it's so important for them to understand those systemic barriers, but also not seeing themselves as just being an oppressed people, but seeing their own agency and what control they have over this. And so this was something that really stood out about Sam's book. He talks about the environment and the situations that have played into this issue, but also his own pretty bad decision making and the way that he was not taking care of his heart and his health the best way. And so as a teacher, I definitely have to point out this chapter 5, where you write about your home economics teacher, Ms. Daneé, and she gave you your first warning, is what you called it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, first, before we get into that, thank you for doing this. And I definitely want to shout out Daneé, as you guys hear how passionate she is about, like, looking at the book in that way. I never looked at it like, oh yeah, it does break down all those things. So, I definitely appreciate that. And Daneé was actually one of my early readers. And she gave me a really good writer's comp. And this was like a writer's comp, and it was like early, right? Like, it was don't look at the grammar. don't look at all this stuff. Just look at what I'm trying to say. And I think you compared it to Trevor Noah, which is pretty humbling. And my AI said the same thing too, which is crazy. But to go back to your question about 5th grade, so let's go back to 1999, right? This is when I first found out that I had high cholesterol, and I was also in 8th grade. So Miss Dunny, this teacher that she's talking about in home ec class at Warrensville, if you guys know Shanice Dunny, that's her mom. So we know how tight Cleveland is in the community, right? So, and I talk about this in the book, and I just casually mentioned, like, I got high cholesterol because we were talking about cholesterol in home ec. And I did not expect the reaction that she was going to give. She was like, what? Like, I was like, whoa, wait, what, did I just do something wrong? So eventually, she made me go downstairs and get my preferred snacks out of the vending machine. And this is the first time anybody really read food labels in the most embarrassing way possible. So, like, that's one story that always sticks with me. But definitely, like, as you were saying, when it comes to decisions and everything, just to go into that a little bit more and not to give too much, like, this is going to be my problem, not giving too much about the book, because it's just everything. These are just stories that I always tell. And y'all know I can tell a story. Like, I will hold it here. So now I got to abridge every story. I think about how things are in radio, where we have one thought per break, 60 seconds. So when it comes down to this, it was a lot of factors why I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't start medicine at that point because it was deeper than just a story of liking sugary treats and everything like that. It comes from what I saw with my dad. And you guys should read that a lot in the story, the things that he had to go through. And it's funny, I always say, I got to worry about none of that until I'm 40. Hence, I'm 40. And I wouldn't want to deal with any of that now, feeling so youthful and different things of that nature. But even going back then, that was definitely my first warning. But I think that speaks to the community, right? People. We know about these things, but sometimes we don't address these things. And I compare it to a car a lot, right? Nobody wants to hear that knock in their car. Matter of fact, when you hit that pothole, sorry, this might be a sensitive subject related. She just went through this. When you hit that pothole, what you do? You get real silent because you start listening for everything, like some rattling, the check engine light come on, the low pressure light come on. And the thing is, we have those warnings in the car, but if we didn't, if something is off, we don't know until we go to the mechanic. And what we have to start doing as people is looking at that doctor as a mechanic. We just need to get these regular checkups. It shouldn't be anything when you feel off or something is wrong or you hit a pothole. It should always be, I want to make sure I'm okay and get ahead of anything that might get you.
Absolutely, and I think that that is a perfect segue into my next question, because what you're essentially describing is education. We need to know what we're doing before we get into it. And teacher, so
shout out to all the teachers in here.
Yes, all of us. So with that education piece, I know you stress this throughout the book, but what I teach my students is it's important to know, right? So you know when you hit the pothole, if something's not right, so you know that you should listen, right? But then it's about what steps are you going to take next, right? So you actually talk about this, I think it's chapter 4, Sauce on Everything, right? This chapter was so funny to me because I'm reading and I'm like, wait, that sounds good. Oh, what? The fried sauces, the salt, the butter, yes. And I loved it. Again, I was reading and I was like, this is the stuff I talk to my students about, because we say, like, why? What is the story behind that? What do we need to know to understand that backstory? And at this point in my classroom, my students can say, oh, well, we got a lot of end cuts back during slavery. And we would get the food that needs to have flavors covered up. So we use a lot of seasoning. And then we could talk about even today where we have food deserts, we have scarcity of certain fresh foods and they're more expensive. So there's all these issues that are keeping us from this, right? What steps can we take now? Because it's not enough just to say, I know. It's first step, right? Yes. I know, right? But then what am I going to do about it? So then later on in chapter 29, my notes keep turning off, but I think it's chapter 29, you say from the deep fryer to the air fryer, chapter 26. And in this chapter, you talk about changing some of those habits for yourself, right? Learning how you can make things better. But what I love is you also go into that next step, which is what we see in chapter 27. The chapter is called, Babe, Do You Really Need Another Plate? And what I love about this chapter is it takes it from beyond I know, I do, into I help, right? Talk to us a little bit more about that chapter. What does that phrase mean to you, that question mean to you? Babe, do you really need another plate?
So first off, I always look at Lex when that chapter comes in. Because when I wrote that chapter, I named the title, she was like, why? Like, I don't say that all the time. I'm like, but it has been some times where I went for some thirds, and you like, babe, do you really need another plate? And it's real, right? It's so innocent, and it's so much love in that statement too, right? Because it's saying with a soft nudge, like, hey, you might not need that. And even when it comes down to like eating and our health, there's something I saw the other day where when we're kids, we're taught to clean our plates, right? Don't leave nothing behind. Are you full? Did you get enough? But what we do is we actually surpass our body's receptors to say, stop eating. We good. We got enough energy. But if it's something on that plate, you got to eat. And I think sometimes when we're at home, I will always think, well, we cooked at home, so it's better, so I can get as much as I want. But that's not necessarily the case, because now, even if I am seasoning things differently, right? Like maybe I'm not using as much salt or I'm using olive oil and everything, that's great. But anytime you do anything in excess, it's still going to be bad for you, right? And then plus, we're usually eating later. So when we're eating later, say about like 7 or 8, a couple of hours after that, I'm going to sleep. So then all of that sits on you. So I think that question is just such a, I always look at it as a loving question where she cringes about it a little bit. But it is, the subtitle of that chapter is Accountability is a Love Language. Because for her to care about me and say that, because sometimes people don't want to say those things. Like, I'm going to just let them do me and it ain't going to come out of me, so whatever. But she's like, hey, I'm looking out for you. And this is important. So just think about it. Like, you might want that other plate. Maybe you didn't get enough. Okay, go ahead and go for it. But just think about it before you do it, and just don't do it mindlessly. So again, going back to what you said about knowing, I always say it's not about what happens, it's about what happens next, right? So we all find ourselves in situations, but how do you come out of that situation? How do you react to it? What do you do after that? And after hearing we need another plate, what do I do after that? Do I get another plate? Or do I just leave it alone?
And you've essentially begged you need another plate to all of us, the readers. Like, this is me taking it from the knowing, the doing, to the sharing, right?
Yes.
Holding other people accountable. Read the book, because this is, seriously, I read it, and I get it. Let me not go to the fast food restaurant. He talked about McDonald's a little bit too much. No, Desmond, you can't go to McDonald's, son. And it definitely is.
Oh, that's
Sam's
Oh, now I know.
Making them eat them.
That's all right.
You don't want us to die. Speaking of being healthy, making good decisions, one big piece that you talk about throughout the book is the interactions that we have with healthcare professionals.
Yeah.
Right? And there's chapter 25, it's called The Doctor Dilemma. And I have to pull this quote because I think that it's so interesting. You said, visits with your nurse practitioner have become so pleasant that you completely change your viewpoint about health and wellness. Then you had a not so great interaction with a different medical professional, and you exercise your right as a patient to request to never see her again. Wow.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And what I like about this is we know historically Black people specifically have a huge, huge issue with medical professionals. And we can absolutely trace it to so many instances, right? We have the lack of care that was provided to CE men, right? We have the exploitation of the cells from Henrietta Lacks. We can talk about the maternity care, the maternal health care that is being denied to women, Black women specifically to this day. 1 in 6 in local areas, women are experiencing deaths of their children. So there's plenty of reason for us to not trust medical professionals. However, I think it's important that you talked about the choice that we have, right? And the persistence that we can practice. So if you didn't read it yet, how do you suggest people navigate their distrust while simultaneously advocating for their health?
I think you really just got to challenge yourself to, just go, right? And as easy as that sounds, I think a lot of our thoughts prevent us from going because we think about those past experiences. And going back to the first chapter, right? All right, there's even a chapter called You Won't Live to See 30, right? And that goes to what a doctor told me at 26. Looked me in the eye and said, yeah, you won't live to see 30 with your cholesterol this high. And I just took that as a threat. I felt like, you don't know me, you don't know anything about my family. At this time, I was really active. I was living in Columbus, pick up basketball every day, flag football. So I was out here running around, right? So to hear that was just like, yeah, right, like for real. And that prevented me from getting some life-saving procedures that could have avoided the heart attack. So I always think about that moment, about, man, if I did do these things, would I have had that heart attack? And as crazy as it sounds, I'm happy I did because it was a wake-up call. I wouldn't be here telling you guys about my story and how you can change. But I carried that with me when I started to have these appointments with the nurse practitioner because it didn't start off sweet. Like, I'm like, hey, no, I don't want to do that. Nope, I don't want to do this. Dang, I had a heart attack, so I got to do it. You know, so I had to get over my own pride, right? So when we talk about this one situation that I had to go into the nurse practitioner. Everything was good. She even convinced me to get on another medicine that I didn't want to get on because I'm already on all these medicines for cholesterol, whatever. So when I didn't have this appointment with her and I had this appointment with this other nurse practitioner, she basically said, she thought I was like pre-diabetic or something like that. And she said, wow, you got high cholesterol, you're pre-diabetic, you don't work out every day, you'll die. And I'm like, heard this before, pump your brakes, you know what, do what you gotta do, check my numbers, but I don't see it. Because if this is how you're talking to me, like, think about the fear that I could have. You know, I could go home and that could be on the back of my mind and it could change so much. I could just change my whole lifestyle like, well, YOLO, I'm about to die, so let me just do whatever I need to do. And that's definitely not the case. Approach is so important. And even when I meet young medical students through the American Heart Association, like when I travel, and I always offer them one piece of advice. I say, learn bedside manner, because it's really the difference between life and death. How you tell somebody something and how they receive it. And a lot of times we don't know how to process our emotions,
Yeah.
right? We might hear something and, it sticks with we might react. Some people hit stuff, punch holes in walls or whatever, but there's so many different type of reactions that you can have, and doctors really never think about it. So when it comes to advice to all of you guys, always remember that you are the customer. We never really look at it like that when it comes to the healthcare system, right? It's just, I got to go to the doctor because they told me to go to the doctor and they're going to make me better. But you are the customer.
Yeah.
You have the power to choose who you want to see. You just got to do a little research. You got to look at some of the reviews, ask your friends who they go to, but just always remember you're the customer, and that message, that bedside manner, shouldn't be the reason that you're in the ground, especially when that's something that you could control.
I learned that I apologize, but every now and then I like data, every now and then I like to look at and see what it says. And so a big part of what you talk about is that agency, that ability that we have to make decisions for ourselves and how we can control the outcomes that happen in our lives, right? But then you also mentioned this, and then the data shows it as well, that some places the outcomes aren't that great.
Yeah.
So in Cleveland's heart disease data brief from February 2024, it indicated that 1 in every 4 male deaths and 1 in every 5 female deaths in Cleveland were associated with heart disease. And these numbers get even more scary when we talk about data from an earlier study, where it talks about entire clusters and neighborhoods, including this one right here in Glenville, where certain wards repeatedly show higher mortality across gender lines, consistently exceeding city averages. And so when people maybe look at this data, or they interpret it, or maybe they put it into ChatGPT to understand a little bit more, what it essentially says is that where you are from, beyond just the race, beyond the actions that you take, you're predisposed to certain outcomes, right? How do you tackle that nuance, like that complexity there? If I was born into this, what do I do?
Yeah, that's a hard thing to swallow, right? Because we don't think about that. We just know we can't control where we're born or where we live, so how do you get over that? And I think what I've realized in writing this book is there's power in storytelling. And first, it's awareness is key, knowledge is power, and power to the people. That's the realest thing that I've started to say, because when you don't know, you don't know. And the thing is, if you are in this area, you mentioned this earlier too, you mentioned food deserts, right? This is a food desert. There is no real access to fresh grocery stores where you can get these produce, be able to take it home and cook and control some of those ailments that you might have, high blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, etc., right? But when you know these things and you have somebody giving you that advice, like, hey, listen, you might not get some fresh options here, but these are some ways that you can go to this grocery store and do this, or maybe you should see this doctor here. There are so many different resources that you can find, but you just need to know about it, and that's where storytelling comes in. You want to get people curious about these things first. And one thing that I say in the book, I don't preach and I don't shame, because I never worked for me. Like, the first thing I'm gonna do, and even when we talk about the statistics, I might, but even when you talk about the statistics, I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago with this doctor, and he said, yeah, I don't want to overwhelm people with statistics, because it usually turns people off. And that's true. Like, when you start talking numbers, it's like, yeah, whoa, what? But when you start telling the stories, people live. And that's what this book is, right? So this book is really the story of my life with the medical fact thrown in there. And, I've been so blessed to be a part of the American Heart Association on a local and national level since I've had this heart attack. So it's been about, 12, 11 years now. I can't even, it's so crazy that it's been that long. But being a part of it, I hear all this medical, these terms and jargon and everything. And it's like, I don't understand that, but I'm in the room to be able to ask questions. But then when I turn it into a story, I'm like, hey, did you know X, Y, Z? Because this is the fact behind it. Now I really got you. This is how you can fix it. So again, it goes back to one of those things about controlling what you can control. And the book breaks down actually into 4 pillars. And one of those pillars is control the controllables. We can all control what we can control. We can't control everything. And it even goes into that, it's not about what happens, it's about what happens next, right? Yes. Because what happens next is what we can control. So again, going back to areas like this, when you know better, you do better. And again, that comes through stories.
Yes, absolutely. That was beautiful.
Thank you. That's why I wrote a book.
My friend. All right, so my final question, I have to talk about just some of my favorite pieces of the story. One, I want to absolutely shout him out for his vulnerability. He is so vulnerable throughout this story, and I know, one, because I talked to him, but also I know Black men, right? It is really tough to be honest about matters of the heart, and we're not talking the organ, we're talking the pieces of us that feel the most real, the most authentic, the pride, yes. And there are so many moments where he completely just bears it all. He's honest. He's sensitive to the people who are also being mentioned. And he just shows his true heart towards helping others, right? And so I definitely tell you, this is your warning. There are some moments that you will likely cry, because I boo-hoo ugly cried on some parts. Like, I'm thinking about it, I'm about to cry now, I'm crying. But one of my favorite parts is chapter 21, protect your heart and everything in it. And in this chapter, I told y'all I'm a crier. You write about your engagement and your wedding, your beautiful wife Alexis. And first I have to say that I love your love story. I love the way you write it. I love the way I see it. It's just beautiful. I constantly, I'm just in awe, right? And it's not one of those things where you, oh, hashtag relationship goals. Like it's just people who are being real, who are able to go through it. And throughout the book, you talk about those moments of how you two support each other, how you are dealing with serious, major losses, and you're supporting one another through it. You're holding one another accountable in the ways that we discussed. But I love this quote from that chapter where you say, the love from all these people is a reminder that I don't owe it to just myself, but to my community, my village, and my tribe, to take care of myself and be there for them by making the right decisions. Can you talk to us a little bit more, because you kind of touched on it, but how important is it for family and community to come into play when we talk about our individual decisions regarding our health?
So to start off with that too, that's one of the pillars too, right? Lean on your tribe. And this came from when I had the heart attack. It was Memorial Day weekend of 2015. And I'm the planner, I'm social, right? Y'all know me in this room. And we had some big plans for Memorial Day. But then everything just stopped when Alexis put in the chat that I had a heart attack. Some people thought it was a joke. And I'm going to the hospital. I'm not thinking I'm gonna be there for a long time, but I am. But when I was there, so many people came to visit and showed so much love. It was overwhelming. My roommate was like, "You famous?" Like, man, like it was to the point where the hospital was like, "Hey, look, 1-2 guests at a time because of all y'all coming in here," and it was really overwhelming. And for Memorial Day weekend, you know, the Red Fest is going on. What the that's another story. But the Red Fest is going on. The Memorial Day weekend, barbecue sitting there, and I'm in the hospital. But I never felt alone because there was so many people from work, childhood friends, everything. And when I finally had the moment to kind of just chill and decompress, I would say it was that Monday, that actual Monday for Memorial Day. Alexis was still living in Columbus, so she had to go back. Everybody was getting ready for work and stuff. It just really started to hit me. And I'm like, man, it was so much love in that room. What if I would have just died? Like, what would have happened? You know, I started to think about that. Like, you know, aside from the plans and everything that was going on, I think that was the first time I really saw the impact that I have on people. And it's like, for what I bring to people, maybe that should be a motivating factor. You know, like, I wouldn't be an uncle anymore. I wouldn't be a son. I wouldn't be a brother. Me and Alexis were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time. I wouldn't have been a boyfriend. You know, there's so many things that I realized that would have been gone. So that stayed on my mind. I went through cardiac recovery, and I talk about this in the book too, where I had to give a graduation speech. And before I gave the graduation speech, Heartstrong came into my mind. And you guys will read more about that with the chapter of Birth of Heartstrong. And a big point of that, like I have these pillars, yes, but it's always been Heartstrong. Protect your heart and everything in it. And that statement comes from my family, it comes from Alexis, and it comes from my friends. And that turned into a pillar because it's so important when we look at these 4 pillars. Protect your heart and everything in it, lean on your tribe, control the controllables, and break generational curses. As we've talked about when it comes to the doctors, the hospitals, you might have a bad experience, but you gotta go back. Don't let that beat you down. Or don't just take what people have said to you in the past and just say, oh, okay, well, don't believe it. I'm gonna drink ginger ale with the stomach hurt. You know, like we gotta get over that stuff. You know, like actually seek a medical professional, like seek medical attention. So those are the 4 pillars, but again, it all started after that heart attack, just seeing so much love and just me stressing the people. Think about those people who are in your life, the things that you do. Me and Jessica, we ride bikes together, right? So just think about the people in the relationships that we built with that. You know, me and Cliff and Mordecai and Hung are fraternity brothers, you know what I'm saying? So like when we think about like the frat and everything like that. So when you're not there anymore, it is a void. And I felt that when we've dealt with those major losses that we talk about in the book. So I've seen it, and I've seen what could happen if it was me. And that's where that comes from.
I love the responsibility of that, because a lot of us may see ourselves as being caring or loving someone. It's like one of the most loving things you can do is to take care of you, be healthy. Good care of yourself.
Yeah.
That's it. Like it seems so normal, like, right? It makes sense. Take care of myself. It's very simple. But some of us we pour and we pour and we pour and we pour, and it's like, hey, you're on this ground and you are dying. So you are dying, and all of these extra steps that came from you would not have been here if you weren't. And you are a blessing because you are here, right? So I love that. I think that's beautiful. What I want to do now is open up the floor to anybody else that might have a question for Sam, and allow them to yap some more.